The way we come at it, I realized something that I didn't realize, that what computers can't do is a pretty strictly Heideggerian book, and that means it's mainly criticizing what people called mental representations, or when they're in, the people must have had a model of the world in their mind in order to act on it, and that starts with Descartes. Then the computer people took it over, and now they talked about symbolic representations in the computer, and they said, Herbert Simon is the one who said it, that we are physical symbol systems, people and computers, because they have these representations, and then they use rules to make inferences about what's going on in the world and what to do about it. And that's what struck me as wrong from a Heideggerian perspective, where we respond to the unique situation and we don't use rules, and more important for this moment.
Okay.
We're going to have to do that question over again.
Okay.
Okay.
Ran out of tape or what?
No, just take up from that last question.
Okay. So is there a common theme in these books that you've written on the limits of technology that requires us to bring in Merleau-Ponty at this point in the discussion again?
Yeah, well, I see now, I hadn't really thought about it before, but the way the discussion has gone, there are really just two components. When I was at MIT teaching Heidegger, I was interested in the fact that the MIT AI people said that we had mental representations of the world, that in our mind there had to be a whole model of the world on the basis of which we could then make inferences and act. And the computer people said, well, that's right, we've just learned how to do that. We have symbolic representations in our computers and inference rules that enable the computers to plan and to act. And now there's several things to say about that. Mostly, I thought that this wasn't going to work, because Heidegger and Wittgenstein too had shown that meant the whole Cartesian mental representation way of thinking about the mind's relation to the world is wrong. In Heidegger jargon, we are just an open head, in effect, turned toward the world. We are directly in a dynamic interaction with the world and other people. We don't have this intermediate of a representation in the mind. And so I predicted that AI was going to fail.
AI being artificial intelligence.
Yeah, right. Artificial intelligence was going to fail, and it now pretty well has failed. I started at Rand with a paper in 1965 called Alchemy and Artificial Intelligence, which is the basis of the book. And now my former students call this good old-fashioned AI, GoFi, this attempt to make what, I forgot an important piece. Simon said, and Herbert Simon, and this is, you ask, are we machines or not? We are just like computers. They and we are simply, physical symbol systems.
That's what Simon said.
Yeah. In our brain, the neurons represent the world, and in the computer, the transistors or the chips represent the world, and we're going to make, Simon said in 65 that in 20 years we'd have computers that would do everything that people could do, and I said they're not going to be doing anything that people can do, and I won. I mean, good old-fashioned AI is out. Nobody does symbolic AI, or only one or two people. So Heidegger won that round. But then, now here's where Merleau-Ponty comes in. The interesting feature of one of them, of being in time, is Heidegger does the whole destruction of the mental representation story and our interaction with the world without even mentioning the body. He mentions it once and says, well, the body is an interesting problem, but we're not going to deal with it here. Well, Merleau-Ponty sort of just filled that gap. Merleau-Ponty only talks about the body. He doesn't care about, in effect, you could say this, I see, that if you ask, well, what takes the place of mental representation? It's body sets to cope with things and to move toward the optimal grip. And whereas Heidegger critique of mental representation is the way to bring down the claim of the artificial intelligence people that they understand these issues better than we philosophers, there's a kind of little irony here. I mean, when I started reading their stuff, I realized that they had taken over philosophy. They had sort of bought
Who had taken over?
Okay, the people in the AI lab,
I see.
with their mental representations, had taken over Descartes and Hume and Kant, who said concepts were rules and so forth. And far from teaching us how it should be done, they had taken over what we had just recently learned in philosophy was the wrong way to do it. The irony is that in 1957, when AI, artificial intelligence, was named by John McCarthy, was the very year that Wittgenstein's philosophical investigations came out against mental representations. And Heidegger already in 1927, that's being in time, wrote a whole book against mental representations. So they had inherited a lemon. They had just taken over this loser philosophy. And if they had known philosophy, they could have predicted, like me, that it was a research program. They took Cartesian modern philosophy and turned it into a research program, and anybody who knew enough philosophy could have predicted it was going to fail. But nobody else paid any attention. That's why I got this prize. I saw what they did, and I predicted it, and that's the end of them.
You write, in I think it's in the On the Internet book, you say, in cyberspace then, without our embodied ability to grasp meaning, relevance slips through our non-existent fingers. And you go on to say,
That's
the
neat.
world is a field of significance organized by and for beings like us with our bodies, desire, interest, and purpose.
Right, and that's where Merleau-Ponty comes in. None of that would be said by Heidegger. Heidegger was just interested in the way we could disclose the world without mental representation. But Merleau-Ponty sees that there isn't anything mental about it. It's the basic level, our body and its skills for dealing with things and getting an optimal grip on things is what we need to understand. And then it becomes clear that computers just haven't got it. They haven't got bodies and they haven't got skills. And now something you just read is important. The world is organized by embodied beings like us to be coped with by beings like us, and the computer is just totally, lost in the world from the bottom up. It would have to have in it, among its a model of the world and a model of the body, which they have tried, but it's certainly hopeless. And without that, the world is just utterly ungraspable by computers. And but now I want to get from there to the issue which isn't computers. The way that Merleau-Ponty comes into it is through the body, and I got interested in writing this book about the internet because there it's no longer a question of making artificial minds by using computers. Heidegger trashed it and it trashed itself. But it's now a question of, people said, it's hard to remember, it's only maybe 10 years ago, the marvelous thing about the internet is that we don't have to have bodies on the internet. We are in cyberspace. Everybody is in touch with everybody else. Nobody's limited by their body, by how they look, by their local situation. I had a good friend, I dedicate the book sort of to him, Nathaniel Goldhaber, who was an important venture capitalist, who was saying, isn't it great we're going to be able to sell everything on the internet and see everything on the internet, and all of it, our bodies will be irrelevant. And there were these people called extropians at MIT who said we'll become immortal because everything that's important about us is what we can transmit on the internet, and everything else is just that mortal part of us, we can leave it behind. There was all this anti-body hype, and there's where Merleau-Ponty comes in, because in the quote you read, Merleau-Ponty says that it's our body with its skills which enable us to relate to things by going around them, and relate to people by this interesting thing called intercorporeality, where I don't have to figure out from what your gestures and how you look, what you're thinking and what you're doing. I respond immediately with my gestures and my look. In Merleau-Ponty, that intercorporeality seemed to him magical. Whenever he couldn't explain anything, that was just his word for it. Now they've discovered something called mirror neurons, where it turns out that the same neurons in apes that pick up, that perceive a certain movement, if I'm grasping for something is the case, also are the neurons who produce the movement. So that it's no accident that when you see me doing it, you do an appropriate thing. I think of this myself. They never mention yawning, but yawning would be the clearest case of this. Yawning is intercorporeality. And if things are boring and I yawn, you don't have to figure out what it meant. You can't help but yawn. So Merleau-Ponty has all the way the body is, as he puts it, geared into the world. And that's what the internet definitely leaves out.